The Cleveland Way, 110 miles from Helmsley to Filey over 10 non-consecutive days. On a dull November day in 2019, I started engaging in battle with the elements on the Cleveland Way. Rain and mist were my constant companions, but I loved every step of this stunning trail. Over the course of the next few years, on intermittent visits to Yorkshire, I worked my way round the horseshoe shape delineated by the trail on the map. The Cleveland Way, which opened in 1969, is the second trail to be defined as an official national trail in England and Wales. The first half crosses the western and northern escarpment of the North York Moors, traversing woodlands, green dales and heather-clad moorland, while the second half wends its way south along the North Yorkshire and Cleveland Heritage Coast, taking in picturesque fishing villages, sandy bays, dramatic cliffs, wooded wykes, the seaside resorts of Whitby and Scarborough, and the Filey Brig Peninsula. The Cleveland Way is not for the faint-hearted, since some of the terrain is quite challenging, and the total ascent, around 18,250 feet, is roughly equivalent to climbing Ben Nevis 4 times from sea level, but it is a highly worthwhile adventure. Day 1, Helmsley to Sutton Bank, 10 miles. Here is the start of the Cleveland Way in Helmsley. Rievaulx Abbey looming through the mist. Rievaulx Abbey was a Cistercian abbey built in the 12th century, but abandoned during the 16th century following Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. Unfortunately, it was closed on the day I passed by, but a quick diversion of the trail was enough to impress me of its special importance as one of England's great abbeys. Stepping stones in Spring Wood. Day 2, Sutton Bank to Osmotherley and Ingleby Arncliffe, 16 miles. After having completed the first and fifth stages of the trail, see below for stage 5, I could hardly wait to return and walk the next one. I was very excited to return on a bright frosty day in December 2019. As I drove along the steep, scary road leading up towards the car park at Sutton Bank, I noticed that several cars had skidded off the road on the bends due to the icy conditions. However, I made it up unscathed, parked the car, and rushed off in a hubristic manner to find the start of the next stage of the trail on the other side of the road. I then noticed a large group of people standing on the bend in the road, surrounding a car which had crashed into the bank. The driver and passenger were sitting on the ground in a state of shock, but appeared to be uninjured. I was so keen to get started on my walk, and so busy looking at the incident unfolding before my eyes, that I failed to notice that I was walking on ice, and before I knew what was happening, I fell over on the road with a tremendous crash. Oh, the humiliation! I leapt up in embarrassment as all the people gathered around the accident diverted their attention towards me. I brushed myself off quickly and shot off down the trail at the speed of light. I was completely mortified and walked the first 6 miles in the state of self-vilification before I realized that I had actually hurt my knee when I fell over. It was very painful, but after smothering it in analgesic gel and plasters, I somehow managed to walk the remaining 10 miles without any further mishaps. Entering Osmotherley via this narrow stile. Osmotherley has a couple of challenges for walkers with large rucksacks. The Cleveland Way passes through this house in Osmotherley. Lone tree above Osmotherley. Milestone moment. This is where the coast-to-coast path meets the Cleveland Way, just above Ingleby Cross, and where my sister and I crossed 10 years ago in the foulest weather we have ever experienced. This time it was bright and sunny, although bitterly cold with frost on the ground. Day 3, Ingleby Arncliffe to Claybank Top, 9 miles. In 2009, when my sister and I did Wainwright's Coast to Coast walk, we walked along the Cleveland Escarpment in the worst weather I have ever experienced. Torrential rain, howling winds and thick fog. In April 2020, I returned in beautiful spring weather to see what I had missed, and was stunned by the stupendous views from the top of the Cleveland Escarpment and the Wainstones. For my account of this section, please take a look at my coast-to-coast narrative. But here I am including the only 2 photos that we have of that memorable day, taken by our wonderful Canadian friends who we met on the trail, Jane and Gary. These epic photos show us holed up at the halfway point in Lordstone's Cafe, which was literally standing in a lake of water at the time. Fast forward 11 years to 2020, and the photos I took at and from the Wainstones along this section show a completely different picture. The Wainstones are impressive sandstone crags with stupendous views that are very popular with rock climbers. The Wainstones. Looking towards Rosebery Topping from the Wainstones. Day 4, Claybank Top to Rosebery Topping, 14 miles. Several months later, in November 2020, I returned to Claybank Top to walk my next section of the Cleveland Way, which runs in tandem with the Coast to Coast walk. Once again, this section was a revelation, because when we had walked it back in 2009, the weather was still pretty grim, and consequently we did not take any photos. The continuing section of the Cleveland Way and Coast to Coast walk, which starts from the top of Claybank. I was delighted that I would be able to see where I was walking this time. Leaving Claybank Top and heading up towards Carr Ridge. Bloworth Crossing, which is where the Cleveland Way and the Coast to Coast part company. This was a very nostalgic moment and involved me dancing for joy in the puddles on the trail. The Cleveland Way and Coast to Coast junction at Bloworth Crossing. When we reached this point back in 2009, I remember vowing to return one day to walk the Cleveland Way, so this was an extremely satisfying moment. The woods above Kildale, heading up towards Captain Cook's monument. Ditto. Captain Cook's monument on Easby Moor. The monument was erected in 1827 in memory of the famous circumnavigator who lived in nearby Great Ayton when he was a child. Great Ayton Moor, heading towards Rosebery Topping, which can be seen in the far distance. On the summit of Rosebery Topping, with the Cleveland Escarpment in the background. You really feel like you are on top of the world here, and the panoramic views could compete with the view from Sutton Bank. Looking eastwards from the top of Rosebery Topping, the Cleveland Way runs along the top of the ridge in the background. Looking towards Rosebery Topping from the southwest, beautiful larch tree on the slopes of Rosebery Topping. Rosebery Topping from the Cleveland Way. Day 5, Rosebery Topping to Saltburn by the Sea, 12 miles. Further snippets from a wintry Cleveland Way in December 2019. For logistical reasons, I walked the first and fifth sections of the Cleveland Way in November and December 2019, returning subsequently to polish off the other sections as and when the opportunity arose. As can be seen from my account, I walked most of the Cleveland Way, apart from the last 3 days, during the months of winter and early spring, and the weather was not always kind, particularly on this stage. However, it did not spoil anything for me, and I actually enjoyed fighting against the elements, sliding around in the mud, and generally getting very wet and muddy. The North York moors are stunning at all times of the year. This was my world during the first week of December 2019. Mist and mud, slipping and sliding everywhere. Here is the Hanging Stone near Gisborough. Apparently there are usually great views to be had from this natural rocky outcrop, but not so on the day I was there. Highcliffe Wood above Gisborough. It was actually rather spooky walking for miles through the woods along this ridge in the mist, but after a while the atmosphere sort of crept up on me and it started to feel like a warm, comforting blanket. Needless to say, nothing sinister actually emerged from the mist, and I arrived at my destination in Saltburn feeling empowered. Gorse, bringing some colour to the gloom. Gorse is an amazing bush because it flowers pretty much all year round, providing a splash of colour on dull winter days. Mushrooms on Mushroom in the Gisborough Woods. Creative Rubbish Bin near Gisborough. Gisborough Local Nature Reserve. Beneath the Skelton Beck Viaduct. Wonky Bench along Skelton Beck, Saltburn by the Sea. Grey Man Bench along Skelton Beck, Saltburn by the Sea. Saltburn by the Sea, Victorian family sculpture made from twisted galvanised wire by Emma Stothard. Day 6, Saltburn by the Sea to Runswick Bay, 15 miles. I had planned to complete my final 5 stages of the Cleveland Way, the coastal section, in November 2020, but fate intervened in the form of the second COVID lockdown, and my plans were temporarily scuppered when I reached Whitby. I was forced to return home, gnashing my teeth in frustration because I just had 3 days left on the trail. I walked the Saltburn to Runswick Bay stage on an amazingly beautiful day. This stage had steep roller coaster gradients which involved skating on mud for much of the way and hanging onto fences to prevent myself from being blown over the cliff edge in the strong winds. It was a worthy challenge and a great workout, and almost felt like being back on the southwest coast path again, so I was a very happy bunny. I hadn't quite realised how much I missed the southwest coast path until I started on the coastal section of this trail. I was feeling almost euphoric as I trotted along, with the sea on one side and the sound of the seagulls to keep me company. This hardened my resolve to make walking the Pembrokeshire Coast Path a priority. As you will see, I walked the Pembrokeshire Coast Path less than 1 year later in September 2021, completing it even before I managed to complete the Cleveland Way in 2022. Descending into the utterly charming and very popular seaside and fishing village of Staithes, Yorkshire's answer to St Ives in Cornwall, because it is a mecca for artists. The High Street in Staithes. Staithes Harbour. Leaving Staithes. Looking back at Staithes from the Cleveland Way. Staithes Harbour, a card painted by the artist Hilary Thorpe, with whom I stayed when I was passing through Whitby. Wow! Roller coaster trail between Staithes and Runswick Bay. Day 7, Runswick Bay to Whitby, 8 miles. Runswick Bay is another delightful seaside village, which is a very popular destination for tourists, fossil hunters, water sports enthusiasts, fishermen and artists. It has one of the finest sandy bays in northern England. Climbing up onto the cliffs from the beach at Runswick Bay. Yuck! Whitby Sands. The Whalebone Arch with Whitby Abbey in the background. A beautiful display of produce near the seafront in Whitby. Whitby. The town was absolutely heaving with tourists, maybe because it was such a lovely day and people were having a final fling before the lockdown. I thought at the time that if it was like that in the winter, what on earth would it be like in the summer? Whitby to Filey. After I was stopped in my tracks on the Cleveland Way when I reached Whitby in November 2020 due to the second COVID lockdown, I finally returned to finish the job in July 2022, walking 50 miles from Whitby to Filey via Ravenscar and Scarborough. Day 8, Whitby to Stainton Dale, 14 miles. Whitby is such a charming little town with oodles of atmosphere. On my arrival the afternoon before I was due to embark on my final 3 days on the trail, I had a whistle-stop round of exploration and loved window shopping in all the quaint shops selling beautiful but expensive jet jewellery, for which the town is famous. As suspected when I arrived in Whitby in November 2020, the town was heaving with tourists, literally buzzing. But for once I actually enjoyed that, because it had a sort of holiday atmosphere and people genuinely seemed to be having a wonderful time. I felt intuitively that Whitby has a vibe that puts people in a happy mood. One of 9 sculptures on the Whitby Sculpture Trail, created by sculptor Emma Stothard. This one is of a Whitby photographer called Frank Meadow Sutcliffe, 1853 to 1941. I found 5 of the 9 sculptures as I was exploring the town centre. Looking down on Whitby from the top of the steps by the Church of St Mary. The Church of St Mary, Whitby, used as a setting for Bram Stoker's Dracula. The 18th century box pews inside Whitby's Church of St Mary. Definitely before its time on social distancing. I was fascinated by all the box pews and the 3-tier pulpit. the ruins of Whitby Abbey, which was a 7th century Christian monastery that became a Benedictine abbey in the 13th century. Blast from the past as I meet up with the point where Wainwright's Coast to Coast, which I walked in 2009, meets the coast and the Cleveland Way, just 2.5 miles to the north of Robin Hood's Bay. Walking down into the centre of Robin Hood's Bay. The Bay Hotel in Robin Hood's Bay and the end of the Coast to Coast. And 13 years previously, when I completed my Coast to Coast walk. Looking back nostalgically at Robin Hood's Bay. When I arrived in Robin Hood's Bay at the end of my Coast to Coast adventure in 2009, I remember looking up at the cliffs to the south and wondering what lay in that direction. Little did I know then that I would one day find out. Boggle Hole, just to the south of Robin Hood's Bay. A hidden gem and popular spot for beachcombers, geologists and fossil hunters, and in the past, smugglers. Boggle is a northern dialect word meaning hobgoblin. According to legend, hobgoblins lived in the caves along the coast and were thought to have healing powers. View looking back towards Robin Hood's Bay with tufted vetch in the foreground. Tufted vetch has traditionally been used as food for livestock and also in medicine for treating eczema and other skin irritations. I stayed in this cute little glamping pod on a farm near Ravenscar with great views looking east towards the coast. It was so quiet and peaceful there. Day 9, Stainton Dale to Scarborough, 12 miles. Massive horsetail plants growing along the trail between Ravenscar and Scarborough. Horsetail contains high levels of silica, making it ideal for treating conditions such as cystitis, incontinence, and bedwetting in children. Hayburn Wyke between Ravenscar and Scarborough. Wyke comes from the Norse word vik, which means sea inlet or cove. One interpretation of Vikings is people who live in an inlet or cove. Hayburn Wyke is an isolated haven for wildlife and marine life. Hayburn Wyke. Scarlet tiger moths on tufted vetch. Taxidermy shop in Scarborough, with a promise that most of the animals there died long before we were born. While I was standing outside this shop, I was recognised by a fellow badger. Badger is the term used to describe people undertaking Country Walking Magazine's Walk 1,000 Miles a Year challenge. She had recognised the badge I was wearing on my hat. In the 5 years that I have been doing this challenge, I have only ever met 2 other badgers. We had a great chat and then went our separate ways. Me to continue on the Cleveland Way and she to continue her week of local walking in the area. Bench near my Airbnb in Pease Home Park, Scarborough. Day 10, Scarborough to Filey, 9 miles. Just leaving Scarborough on my final day on the Cleveland Way, but just look at this underpass. My way out. It's brilliant. Right, back out to the exit.
amazing. So looking back towards Scarborough, and that's where I'm going to Filey.
View across South Bay towards the centre of Scarborough as I head out from town on the final stage of my Cleveland Way adventure. Looking back towards Scarborough with Rose Bay Willowherb in the foreground. Willowherb is an edible plant which is believed to be effective against stomach and mouth ulcers and has traditionally been used for treating many ailments such as migraines, insomnia, infections, colds, minor wounds and burns, etc. Yay! The end of my Cleveland Way journey on Filey Brig, and also the start or end of the Yorkshire Wolds Way, which I returned to walk just 3 months later. As I arrived from the northwest, another walker was striding triumphantly towards the stone from the south. We indulged in a mutual high five, and he told me that he had just completed the Yorkshire Wolds Way. I told him that the Yorkshire Wolds Way was on my to-do list, but little did I realise then that I would walk it myself that very same autumn. After completing the trail and walking down into the centre of Filey, I ended up joyriding trains all over the grim north on my quest to get home, after my husband Steve rang me to say that he had COVID. My original plan had been to get the train to Middlesbrough and join him and his crew there after I'd finished my walk, but I decided to return home instead, and that involved getting 3 trains, including getting on the wrong train in Doncaster and changing tactics after another one was cancelled, 1 bus and a 3-mile walk. Needless to say, I was pretty knackered by the time I finally arrived home at 10 o'clock in the evening. Lessons learnt. Pride comes before a fall, as my experience at Sutton Bank revealed. COVID has a nasty habit of scuppering even the best laid plans. The Cleveland Way is a very worthwhile trail in all seasons. You just have to work a bit harder in the winter.